Welcome to Wannabe Clutter Free, formerly Wannabe Minimalist, the podcast for busy families who are tired of the chaos, fed up with being overwhelmed, and ready to enjoy life again. Each week, we talk about how to let go of the clutter so that you can focus on the things that actually matter. And it's not just physical clutter, we talk about the mental and emotional stuff too, because if it's holding you back, it's time to ditch it. I share what I've done in my own life to declutter, organize, and calm the chaos, but you won't just hear it from me. There are amazing guests too. It's practical, doable, and simple for those of us that want to be clutter-free. Well, hey there, my friend. Welcome back to the show. My name is Deanna Yates, and you are listening to episode 229 of the Wannabe Clutter Free podcast. On today's episode, I am chatting with Dan Allbaugh about grit and what that means for our kids and how we can help them learn how to be grittier and how to have perseverance so that they can grow into not only awesome kids, but even better adults. And there's some good lessons for us along the way too. So especially if we're looking to declutter and organize our homes, perseverance and grit can be really important for us too. But before we get into it, I want to take a quick second to say thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate that you are here, and I don't take that lightly. But if you love this show, can you do me a huge favor? Can you please subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes? And it also is one of the best ways for you to support the show. You can also share this with a friend or leave a comment over on Instagram. I am at Wannabe Clutter Free over there, or you can come join our group on Facebook. It is the Wannabe Minimalist Family group over there. It's a private group on Facebook, and you can join in our conversation about this episode and any of the other episodes we've had. We also have some fun conversations going on over there around stuff and decluttering and the busy holiday times a year that we're getting into. But no matter what, I just thank you so much for making this part of your weekly routine. And now let's learn more about my guest today. Dan Allbaugh is an award-winning author, husband, and father of 3 kids. His oldest 2 are curious and playful boys whose energy and shared love of games inspired his writing. He lives with his family in Iowa. And fun tip, he is actually a high school friend of my husband. So I have known Dan, his wife, and their children for a very long time. And so it's really fun to actually get to have a conversation with him on the show. It's really fun when you can bring a different aspect of your life into your professional life. So it was really fun having the conversation, a little bit more professional than we normally are when we're hanging out. But I think you're going to really enjoy it and his perspective on how we can really teach our kids some of these harder lessons. And there's some really good self-reflection too, both from him and me on this episode. So I think you're going to really like it. Don't forget also, you can get links to all of his books and the resources we talk about in the show notes. So you can get those at wannabeclutterfree.com/229. Again, that's wannabeclutterfree.com/the number 229. All right, without further ado, let's get on to this conversation. Well, hey, Dan, welcome to Wannabe Clutter Free. How you doing today?
I'm good, Deanna. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. So I was saying at the intro that you and I have been friends for a long time in real life, as you went to high school with my husband. And so it's really fun to have you on the show today. So I don't often get to chat with my longtime in real life friends. So this will be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I was excited when you reached out to me and got an opportunity to talk.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to talk today about grit and our children and instilling these behaviors in our kids that, these positive behaviors we want to see with them. And this has come about because you have written a book called The Gritty Little Lambs. So can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and sharing what inspired you to write the story?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a husband and father of 3 kids. I've got 2 boys, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and then a 1-year-old girl. And I wrote The Gritty Little Lamb back during the pandemic, 2020. We all had a lot more time. And the way that this came about was my oldest, who was 4 at the time, he was really into playing board games, as am I. That's one of my hobbies, but it's something we share together. And when I would play these board games with him, like most kids, he would get frustrated when he didn't do well, and I would beat him. And I felt like there was a lot of opportunities that came up as a result of playing board games. And one of them being grit, perseverance, determination. Hey, maybe you didn't win this time because you're just learning, but over time with practice, you'll get better. So that's really the theme of this book. And it's told over the course of 32 pages. The main character is a little lamb who is effectively my son. And then there's a dad. So the lamb plays the game with his dad, initially loses, gets frustrated, goes and works with mom to get better, challenges dad to a rematch, and ends up beating him. And his dad talks about these lessons throughout the book, as does his mom. So that was the picture book that I created. And then subsequent to that, I have 7 other books in my Gritty Kids series. Most of them are logic workbooks for gritty kids. So they're teaching STEM skill development and really focus on things like spatial awareness, math skills, logic problems, verbal reasoning. Yeah. So that's where I'm at on my journey as an author.
Yeah, it's super fun, and it is a super cute book. I have it here. So we have our own copies, and it is really cute, and it is fun to see the journey and watch Lammy grow as he perseveres, like, works on these, really tough concepts, even for adults. But let's talk a little bit about grit. So for those that aren't really familiar with the term, I think we hear this term a lot, and we hear it thrown around a lot, but maybe we don't know exactly what it means. So how would you define grit?
It's a great question. And I will frequently read this book to groups of kids at schools. And when I introduce the book title to them, one of the first things I ask them is, does anybody know what gritty means? And some people answer, they think it's like getting a lot of money. And I'm like, no, that's greedy. So I say, okay, well, let's talk about what grit is. And this story serves as a great introduction to what that term means. Now, for adults, what grit is, it's not just about working hard. It's about staying committed to a long-term goal, even though you might have some obstacles or setbacks. So it's this belief in your ability that you can improve and grow over time through effort and dedication. And so it's like passion plus perseverance. And I'll tell you, I think a lot of people think success comes down to talent or intelligence, but in reality, grit is often the determining factor. So there's this researcher at the University of Pennsylvania. Her name's Angela Duckworth. She's written a book called Grit. Her studies actually show that the children who believe that success lies with those kids that are genetically blessed, they are quicker to give up. They believe they can't do something because they aren't smart enough or creative enough or good enough or whatever enough. Now, on the other hand, there's kids with grit who are more likely to work hard towards achieving a goal. And they believe that all that stands between them and themselves is really just the right amount of effort. And I remember at some point hearing that grit is the personality trait that's most correlated with success in life. And whether that's true or not, it is certainly true that grit is a driver of achievement and success, independent and beyond what talent and intelligence can contribute. So I think gritty individuals sort of push past challenges because they have a sense of purpose and they're determined to see things through, even when the outcome might not be immediately clear or success might feel far away. So grit's really that mindset that says, I might not get this today, but if I keep at it, I will. And what's awesome is, even though grit's a personality trait, it's also a skill that can be learned by modeling the belief that you can do it, just not yet.
Yeah. Oh, so true. And I remember hearing about that study a few years back myself. And it is so interesting. I think part of it also changes how we want to talk to our kids, right? And we want to praise them for the effort that they make versus the outcome, because the effort is the grit, right? That effort of putting in the work and actually doing it. I think the example I heard of was like children that were good in school, in elementary school, and it just came easy to them because they were on that right path and it made sense to them then. And then they hit the obstacle, right? They were always praised for doing, oh, you're so good at school. You're so smart. I'm so proud of you. And talking about that language versus, I'm so proud of how hard you're working to do well. And then as they hit those obstacles in junior high and high school and things got harder, they then thought, oh, I'm just dumb now. Like they didn't realize that they were putting in the effort, but it was easier then. And they just had to continue to put in the effort. And that effort is what we should praise. And to me, that seems what grit might be. Does that make sense?
I think you nailed it. And I can really relate to that story that you told on a personal note because when I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school, academics came pretty easy to me. And my parents would talk about getting A's and B's as a measure of success, right? And if I got a C, which I never did, but like that was a big red flag. Well, when it came time to go to college and choose a major, I probably made some choices that were easier academically because I thought it was more important for me to get those A's and B's versus maybe take some of those classes that were a little bit harder and more personal development related because I was afraid that I wouldn't get good grades in there. So, yeah, you're right on in terms of what grit is and praising success of the effort.
Interesting. Well, and I like that you talked there about choosing the easier thing as an adult, right? Because you didn't necessarily want to be uncomfortable and you hadn't really built that muscle when you were younger. And now we can do that. Right now we have more information as parents and we know that we can help our kids build that up. And I love that is one of the things this book helps kids do. And it brings it down to their level and it makes sense and it's cute and it's fun. Perseverance. Do you think perseverance and grit are the same thing? And why do you think it's important? Aside just from, I think you talked about it a little bit, but are there other reasons why you think it's important in today's world to teach our kids grit and perseverance?
So to me, I think grit, perseverance, determination, they're all synonyms. I suppose if you started to thin slice it, there's probably semantics in all of them, but for all intents and purposes, I probably use those terms effectively the same. But why I think it's important is because today we live in a world of constant distractions. Everything's fast paced, instant results are celebrated. And that's why I think it's important to teach kids grit now more than ever. Our society bombards kids with messages that success should come quickly and easily. We see that in social media, in video games, even some academic approaches will emphasize instant rewards. But we take a step back and think about it, I mean, life's greatest achievements usually come from long term and sustained success. So if kids don't learn perseverance, they might get discouraged when things don't come easily, and they might lose confidence in their abilities. So I think teaching grit helps kids prepare for those future challenges, and whether that's in their personal lives or their academic pursuits or future careers, that ability to stick with something and adapt in the face of setbacks and keep striving towards the goal will help them stand out and thrive. I think grit also encourages patience and problem solving and self discipline, which are qualities that are essential in a world that rewards innovation and creativity, both of which often emerge after repeated failures and learning experiences.
Interesting. I remember, so this is weird because I don't ever say his name on my podcast. So anyway, I remember like my husband and I having a business and we did Techstars in Boulder. And one of the biggest things they talked about was fail fast. And so I feel like there's this it's this two-headed monster you're dealing with, right? How do I know when I need to lean into the grit and the perseverance? And how do I know when I should fail fast and cut my losses before I get too deep and I've gone down this, you know, rabbit hole of something that's not going to pan out? So, what I think that can be a real struggle too. Do you have any tips there?
That is an interesting question. It's something that I've not been asked before, but you're right because it is a delicate balance. You have to understand when should you pull the ripcord on whatever it is that you're working towards. At the end of the day, I think it comes down to sort of a personal assessment of that thing that you're working towards. How important is it to you in the bigger picture? If that's a big goal of yours, it's probably worth putting in more effort and determination. But if you're like me, 5'8", and you're a senior in high school, you might need to give up on that career of being an NBA basketball player because it's probably not going to work out for you. So I think it takes some personal reflection as well. And as a parent of a child who's probably not capable of that, you're going to need to make those assessments for them because we're not all going to be able to play in Carnegie Hall or catch touchdown passes in the Super Bowl. So it's really making that determination, I think, from is your talent and skill level commensurate with the goal that you're trying to put forth?
Interesting. I like the personal introspective look on that of what is it that you really want to accomplish and what feels good. Not feels good on a endorphin level, but what feels like it's right for you. And I think we all have that gut instinct and that natural gut reaction to know yes, this is something I really want to pursue deep down in the depths of my soul versus it would be nice. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Any examples of challenges you faced as a parent when it comes to instilling grit in your own children as a dad of 3?
All the time. I mean, my 1 year old, I probably can't teach her much about grit yet, but my 8 year old and my 6 year old, yeah, we deal with this all the time. I think one of the biggest challenges I face is balancing my desire to protect kids from frustration and their need to like struggle a little bit. So I think all parents, we naturally want to shield our children from disappointment and failure. But, if we do that too much, we really risk robbing them of the opportunities to build that resilience. So I've learned that part of teaching grit is stepping back and allowing my kids to experience tough moments. So I remember when my oldest son was 2 years old and discovering jigsaw puzzles. It quickly became a passion and obsession for him. Watching him struggle to figure out where the pieces would go or how to rotate them, it was a personal challenge for me not to like jump in and put them in the correct spot. And I remember having to exercise this overwhelming feeling of restraint to be hands off but encouraging. Whether it's letting your children fail at a project or not solving the problem for them immediately, those moments can really create invaluable learning experiences. But I will say that another challenge is finding the right way to encourage persistence without causing frustration and turning that into a sense of defeat. Because I think there's a fine line between pushing kids to stick with something that's hard and recognizing when they need a break, right? Is what we just talked about. Because if kids feel pushed too far, it can backfire. So what's helped me is having open conversations with them about effort and growth and learning from mistakes, which helps them see struggles as a normal part of life rather than a sign of failure. And I just did this a few weeks ago with my oldest son. He's now 8. He started to play sports, so we've encouraged him to trade outside of sports a little bit, which include running a mile. And he was frustrated we were making him doing that, and he thought it was too hard. So I had a conversation with him about how beyond the physical benefits of the increased stamina and endurance to help him with sports, doing something challenging like running a mile has mental benefits too. So he's this high academic achiever and everything's come relatively easy for him so far, just like we talked about, right? And he's starting to talk about high academic careers like becoming a doctor or an astronaut. So I told him about how someday the classes he's going to take will challenge him. They're not now, but they will in the future. And he's going to need mental toughness to get through those courses. And the work that he's doing by running a mile helps him overcome the mental barrier of when something is too hard for him.
So good. That is really fun. And I appreciate how you're showing us how to have these conversations that are age appropriate, but also a little more mature, right? Going beyond just, but you really should because it's good for you. Well, why is it good for you? How is this going to help you? And how does it relate to what you're doing now? And using your own life experience. I can so relate to that. Not one, that aspect of wanting to protect. And that has been the biggest struggle, probably one of the biggest struggles of being a parent for me is yes, that resisting that urge to jump in, resisting the urge to react. I'm very animated and I have big emotions and I react to things. And that really kicked me in the behind when our daughter was little and she would get hurt. And all kids do the turn and look to see how you react to them. And if it's a big reaction, then they have a big reaction. And yeah, that was one of the biggest struggles that I had to deal with. And so I can see how not jumping in helps them so much more. But yeah, that's a hard one. So, whew, All right, we'll work on building those muscles and continuing to do it, right? Continuing not to jump in and give as our daughter gets older. She's 11 now, not jump in with a solution, right? I'm trying more to just listen a lot more to when she comes home complaining about something at school or something a friend did or something that happened on the playground or the teacher said something. Just trying to listen more and ask more questions, be more inquisitive myself to give her this ability to build up the emotional intelligence, build up the perseverance, build up the grit, and work through these problem solving things on her own. So, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Good points.
Yeah, it's so hard to exercise that restraint because when your kids are very little babies, you do everything for them. And then as they get older, you slowly have to let your foot off the gas and let them figure that stuff out on their own. And that's a muscle that we all have to exercise. And if we don't do it properly, we'll end up with adult children who are dependent upon us for everything. We'll be doing their laundry when they're 25 years old or cooking for them and sending them meals because they can't do it on their own. Like it's really hard to see your kids struggle because you don't want to see your kids struggle, but it's necessary for them to struggle to be able to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, if we're struggling, just envision your child at 25 who still can't do their own laundry, who still comes to you, who's still living at home. Let's go there. Like they wouldn't even be able to live on their own. So, yes, extrapolate out and be like, yeah, I don't want that to be my life. So let's give them some challenges now so that they can grow. Um, how would you recommend busy, overwhelmed parents that are listening to this? Because that's who my audience is. We've got a lot going on with today's world. How can we encourage our kids to build perseverance in a positive way? So, especially when we're all dealing with our own stress and time constraints and everything going on in our life. So, how can we start to carve out time to actually do this if we feel it's important?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I can certainly relate to that. I'm a busy parent myself. I know how hard it can be to focus on long term lessons like grit when you're juggling the day to day responsibilities of work and family. But one of the best ways to teach perseverance is embedded in your everyday life in small, manageable ways. So, for instance, if you start by encouraging skills in kids to set personal goals that challenge them, whether it's finishing a puzzle or learning a new skill or practicing a sport, that's a simple step that you can do. I like to use milestones like birthdays or summer break or a new year as a way to discuss goals. For example, my middle child, when he turned 6, we discussed with him that he was going to learn to wipe his own bottom going forward from his birthday, the day he turned 6. And we talked about that with him for weeks in advance to prepare him. And when he turned 6, he took on that challenge without a fight. Or this past summer, I talked to my oldest about how he was going to learn to tie his shoe before school started back up in August. And occasionally throughout the summer, I'd set a 2-minute timer and I'd have him try to practice. And I'd tell him his goal was not to yell out in frustration if he failed. So, framing those conversations around growth and effort and the idea that progress is better than perfection can really encourage a positive attitude towards challenges. But a big key is to really celebrate the effort that they put in and the progress that they make rather than only focusing on the end result. So you mentioned that a little bit earlier. So that helps them appreciate the process and teaches them that success is built over time. But you can also model perseverance in your own life because kids are always observing. They see the challenges you're facing, whether that's work stress or personal setbacks or even household tasks. They learn how to cope with frustrations and keep going by watching you. Sharing your own experiences of pushing through hard times can make a big impact, even if it's in those little moments. I think kids probably tend to view their parents and other adults as people who have it all figured out. I don't. I'd be surprised if anyone does, but I think it's a reasonable conclusion considering that we're always telling them what to do. But I'm very open with my kids that I'm a work in progress and that I don't have it all figured out. If I make a mistake in front of them, I'll admit it and I'll talk about how frequently I make mistakes, and that's okay. Or if they ask me a question that I don't know, I'll tell them I don't know. I'll say, of all the knowledge on earth, I probably know less than 1/10 of 1% of it. Let's look this up together and try to figure this out. It's really taking time in those small moments throughout the day that I think you can really learn to help build perseverance in a positive way.
I love that. You said so many things there that were really good. I appreciate that, first off, that you set realistic expectations, right? Y- I think a lot of people struggle with, let's just talk about like the potty training thing. I remember being like, how long am I going to have to wipe my daughter's butt when she goes to the bathroom? How long is this going to last? And I think 6 was right about the same time we were like that it stopped for us too. So I appreciate that you're being realistic because I as a new parent, I didn't really think about that. Like, I didn't really plan for those moments. But I love how you built up to it, right? It was something that you guys talked about. You set the expectation, it was a realistic expectation, and then stuck with it. I think that is a really big part of it too that you didn't mention there, but that you stuck with it. You said, okay, it's 6, and now that's it. This was the time. And by building up to it, then they could get excited about it and take it on and understand that this was the expectation. And then also celebrating the effort. Like when you were talking about learning to tie the shoe, the goal wasn't to tie the shoe. The goal was to deal with the frustration in a reasonable manner and not yell out. You could be frustrated. You didn't have to actually complete the goal. So, yeah, having those little bitty milestones and the progress over perfection. I talk about that all the time, but I love how you gave us some really good examples of that. So, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's all breaking it down into small chunks. You can look at the end game, what the big picture is. Kids aren't going to learn to tie their shoes the one time you sit down and talk to them about it, right? So, how can you make that into manageable chunks, reasonable goals for them? And in our case, with a kid who gets frustrated easily, my goal for him was just do it for 2 minutes. Try not to get frustrated and yell about it. I get that it's hard. A lot of things in life are hard. Everything that you do when you first start is hard. So let's get through that process of being frustrated and learn how to deal with that frustration.
Yeah. I also love the other thing. I'm going to go back to what you said before, too, about that kids look at adult figures in their life, their parents and teachers and everyone else, as seeming to have all the answers and know everything. And I'm not gonna lie, of course, you go through the teenage years of, "I know everything," over your parents, but it still took me a long time to really I still don't know that I have completely ingrained that in my life that other people don't know what they're doing. Like, I say it all the time, but I don't know that I have 100% taken that on board, that we all are trying to figure it out as we go. So, yeah, anyway, I think that was a great realization. And there was one other part I was gonna bring up. Oh, like you said, you still make mistakes. You talk to your kids about making mistakes. I think that's so important. I do that too. And I have 2 examples I was talking with a client about this morning. One, our daughter was a little snippy with me this weekend about something. I don't know. She must have been in the middle of something and I must have interrupted her or something, but she was a little snippy. But later, not right away, but a little bit later, she came back and she was like, you know what? I'm really sorry that I said it that way. I was just, and she modeled what I have modeled for her because if I'm snippy, I try to do it pretty quickly. I try to realize a little bit faster, but I will often apologize to her after the fact when things have calmed down. Of that wasn't I shouldn't have said it that way. Here's what I should have said. Here's what I meant. I apologize. This was happening beforehand and I shouldn't have reacted that way. I apologize for that. But I try to give her the background story of what was happening. And I saw her model that back to me. And yes, our kids are watching what we do. They model what we do back. And the one I have to work on right now that I noticed this morning was the stress of getting out the door. And I don't know what happened, but our daughter was running like a minute late or something, and she had to tie her shoes, and she was like fumbling with her shoes. And I was like, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's take a second. Like breathing deeply for 1 second to calm you down is going to be much better than fumbling for the next 3 minutes of you trying to put your shoe on. But also, so we had that great moment, but then it made me think like, how do I act when I'm trying to get out the door? So now I've got to do some self reflection today on what's my reaction like as I'm stressing to get out the door. And now I need to figure out how I can model the taking the breath and taking a moment to center myself because obviously something is a little off there. But anyway, it just came to mind. I wanted to point out to listeners that none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. And these are things that I'm noticing in my life as well. So we're all doing it together, people. None of us have it figured out. It's okay.
No doubt. Yeah, kids are definitely mirrors, and I tend to notice my bad qualities in my children as the mirror. So it's awesome when you can see a good trait being modeled by your child because of something you did. So that's a great story.
Yeah. Aw, thanks. All right. Well, this has been fantastic. I know people are going to want to learn more about the book, about you. Where can people pick up a copy of this one and your other workbooks?
Yeah, so all 8 of the books in the Gritty Kids series are available on Amazon or anywhere books are sold.
Awesome. Yeah, look it up. We'll have links to them in the show notes as well so people can quickly and easily grab those too. So, well, Dan, this has been great. But before I let you go, I ask all of my guests 3 rapid fire questions. And I know this first one's a little different since you're not really in the decluttering realm, but you do have a very neat house. I have been there before, guys. In fact, we stayed with you for quite a few weeks at one point in our life. So thank you very much for letting us do that.
I think you lived in our house for 4 to 6 months or so when you were in. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I learned how to drive a stick shift car while living at your house. So I felt almost like a little bit like a teenager. We got a stick shift car and that was the first place I learned how to. So, anyway, funny. All right, perfect. So, these questions are the quick fire question. The first one is, what does clutter free mean to you?
Oh, man. That's a great question. I remember between the periods of 18 to 25, I moved probably 7 times. Most of us do if you go to college. And every time I moved, I would look at something and I'd be like, have I used this in the last 6 months? And if I haven't used it, I'd get rid of it. And now I've lived in my current house for 11 years, and especially with kids, and your listeners know this, like you acquire more and more and more stuff all the time. So to me, decluttering is like constantly going through what you have and getting rid of it if you haven't used it in the last 6 to 12 months. I'm not as good as I probably should be, but I attempt to do that. And I'll tell you that probably nothing fills me with as much joy as when I drive over to Goodwill with 3 sacks of stuff just to get away.
Oh, that dopamine hit, it is addicting, isn't it? So, it's good. It's good to balance out. So, that's awesome. All right, number 2, what's making you happy right now or in this season of life?
Yeah, right now, so I'm in Iowa. We have unseasonably warm weather for October. Temperatures are in the 70s and 80s when they're normally in the 30s and 40s. So getting to spend time outside this time of year in shorts and a t-shirt is making me exceptionally happy, particularly as I have to spend every weekend at a soccer field or a football field, not bundling up and being uncomfortable. So that is making me very happy right now.
Oh, it's so nice. I think your weather beginning October was way better than ours, and we're in San Diego, so it's just really funny, but yeah, I'm happy for you guys, that's awesome. And number 3, what is a goal you have for yourself this year?
Yeah, good question. So I'm working on a ninth book in my series right now. I have found that my kids really enjoy riddles and brain teasers. We were out in Colorado last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember, and my kids were complaining about the hike that we were on. And the way that I kept them engaged and from not complaining was to pull up some riddles and brain teasers on my phone and ask them. So I have this idea to compile some riddles and brain teasers and put them together in a book to keep kids entertained.
Ooh, I love it. Our daughter loves I think they're called Rebus. Are those the picture
Yeah.
ones? The picture puzzles? She loves those.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can see that being another hit. So, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for joining us, and everyone grab a copy of The Gritty Little Lamb.
All right. Thanks for having me, Dee. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, have a great day. All right. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much to Dan for coming on the show. I really do love his book. It's cute. It's called The Gritty Little Lamb. It's got lots of information, and I think your kids would really connect with the story and the message there. And also, his workbooks are fabulous too. And I know he didn't mention it, but I will link to it in the show notes. He also has an app. So if you are interested in getting some more games for your kids on the phone that are more learning specific instead of just having them be consumers. He has an app there too, so I will make sure I link to all of those things in the show notes because they're really great tools to help your kids learn perseverance and then also help you be able to step back and help them work through those moments of not necessarily frustration, but just learning. And I think we talked about that on the show. That is one of the hardest things that I have had to learn as a parent, and I still struggle with it. So it's definitely something that I am working on too. But I would love to know what you thought of this episode and our conversation. So if you want to leave a comment or join in on the conversation, you can do that over either on Facebook in our private group at the Wannabe Minimalist Family Group there on Facebook, or you can come and leave a comment or send me a DM on Instagram. I am at Wannabe Clutter Free on that channel over there. And then don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to continue to get decluttering and organization inspiration sent to you weekly. I take a real holistic approach. So it's not just about the stuff inside your home. It is also, yes, it is the physical stuff. Yes, it is getting out that physical clutter that we think of when we first think of decluttering, but it's also letting go of expectations and obligations and just things that also affect us emotionally and mentally in all the areas of our life. So I want you to have freedom to kind of just be yourself and be the true, authentic person that you are meant to show up in this world. And so that is what I bring to you on this podcast each week through our different guest episodes and our solo episodes. And speaking of solo episodes, I will be bringing you a solo episode next week. We're going to be talking about the holidays and really making sure that we are working on this clutter-free approach to this busy, busy, busy time of year. As we approach November and December, we really get into the holidays here in the US. And this is a time where moms, especially, can feel so overwhelmed by all the expectations and pressures that they put on themselves. I know there are some external ones, but come on, ladies, we do a lot of this to ourselves. So we're going to talk about what we can do to make this time of year manageable and more enjoyable because we make this time of year magical for our families. Let's make it special for us too. All right, that's what we're going to talk about next week. So make sure you don't miss it. Until then, keep things simple, keep thinking clutter free, work on building grit with not just your children, but also yourself. Build up those perseverance muscles and work on some of this tough stuff that we have to deal with in life. And remember that I believe in you. I know that you can do it. I know you can reach your goals. So keep working at it. All right, I'm Deanna Yates, and you've been listening to Wanna Be Clutter Free. I'll see you next week. Cheers.